black education. Oh my, we saw some black girl magic with the live podcast, the inaugural live podcast of Margaret Fortune, President and CEO of Fortune School. It was wonderful, featuring a conversation with black women leading America's top schools. And again, truly, black girl magic was on the scene at the forefront in that. It was wonderful. Then that was followed up with a police reform panel discussing where are we now? And we had some heavy hitters. People were on the front lines, such as Attorney Ben Crump, Dr. Shirley Weber, California Secretary of State, and Assemblyman Mike Gibson, who represents the District 64 of California, and then a mother of the movement, Saquette Clark, CEO of I Am Sec Foundation. That was an exceptional panel right there, but not to be outdone. It was followed up at 1 o'clock with the national poll release of What Black Voters Think, sponsored and led by Larry Lee, publisher of the Sacramento Observer newspaper. And I mean, it's been power-packed, informative, empowering, educational. Let me tell you, that's what NAN Sacramento Rise Up Conference is all about. And guess what? We're not stopping yet. Tonight, we're having a conversation with none other than the Honorable Martin Luther King III on this evening, the eldest son of the great civil rights leader and legend, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. So we want you to sit back and relax, watch out, because, man, tonight is going to be wonderful. At this time, what we're going to do is going to have a selection to prepare our hearts and minds for what's to come on this evening from none other than my brother, Pastor Ellington Porter. Come on, put your hands together as he comes.
Praise God. There's a song we like to sing around here. It just says, Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary. So we're going to ask that you just, where you at, just get ready to be prepared, all right? So Lord, prepare me to be sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, and with thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Help me say it, come on. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, and with thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Let's take it up a little bit higher. Lord, prepare me, be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, and with thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. One more time, let's say, come on. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, and with thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. And my answer will be yes, 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 oh yes, yes, oh yes, yes, yes. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. And with thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you.
And with thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Well, again, we are excited to have on tonight a member of the first family of Black America. Black America. As the oldest son of the late Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Mrs. Coretta Scott King, Martin Luther King III has seized the torch lit by his parents and is continuing their quest for equality and justice for all people. Whether speaking to an audience in Mozambique or Mississippi, Israel or India, his vision of the future has touched thousands, motivating audiences around the world with his insightful message of hope and responsibility. For nearly 20 years, Mr. King's dedication to creating and implementing strategic nonviolent action to rid the world of social, political, and economic injustice has propelled him to the forefront as one of the nation's most ardent advocates for the poor, the oppressed, and the disillusioned. Last year, instigated from the protest movement that has risen up since the police killing of George Floyd, Mr. King III, along with the Reverend Al Sharpton, organized the Get Off Our Necks Commitment March on Washington on August 28, 2020, the 57th anniversary of the historical March on Washington, where Martin Luther King Jr., his father, delivered his I Have a Dream speech. Over 200,000 persons, including myself and my family, attended this historic occasion, and our lives are forever changed. After this video, the next voice that you will hear is none other than our special guest on this evening, the Honorable Martin Luther King III. Go ahead and roll video.
I do that. Okay. Tell him I'm sorry. Tell him I'm sorry.
Let's cut the video, and we'll make sure that we'll work that out next time. Are we? Amen. Well, of course, technology always hampers us a little bit at this wrong time. So while our tech department figures that out, we're going to go ahead and go straight to Martin Luther King III. Mr. King, are you there?
I have no control. I am here. Your technology. You may be. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir, loud and clear.
I'm trying to get the. It won't allow me to start the video component, and I'm not sure why. Let's see. There we go.
Oh, there you are. Yep, we got you. You're looking good, sir.
And you too. Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Thank you for coming on tonight. We can't wait to hear from you. We know it's late out there, so we're trying to get you on as soon as possible. So we'll turn it over into your hands.
Okay. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Reverend Porter, and to other leaders of the National Action Network, and specifically the Sacramento chapter. I'm certainly honored to join you today via the magic of Zoom. On behalf of my wife and partner, Andrea Waters King, and our daughter, Yolanda Renee King, I want to thank the Sacramento affiliate of the National Action Network for inviting me to address this forum. And I thank you also for your energetic leadership in carrying forward the unfinished work of my father, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. My thanks also to my very dear friend and your founder and president, national president, I should say, the Reverend Al Sharpton. And I thank Rev for his strong support of my family over the years and for his unwavering dedication and leadership for our struggle for racial justice. I don't believe that anyone in America has worked harder than the Rev to address the crisis of police violence against African Americans in our country. As a civil rights leader, as a media commentator on television and radio, and as a pastor and a friend to thousands, he has brought comfort, hope, and love to the families of the victims of police violence. We owe a great debt and a profound debt of gratitude for his tireless effort to rectify this continuing injustice in our nation. You know, these are difficult times as we struggle to keep our families healthy and secure. I'm encouraged that the Sacramento National Action Network has also found ways to reach out and help the disadvantaged, downtrodden, and oppressed people of our communities. I commend you for your great works and your leadership on behalf of our sisters and brothers in their struggle for justice, equality, and civil rights. When my father was assassinated in 1968 on April 4th, he was mobilizing a multiracial coalition for economic justice. He called it the Poor People's Campaign. He was emphatic that the coalition must include people of all races who were suffering economic injustice. In the wake of the protest against the police murders of George Floyd, Stephen Clark, Dante Wright just a few days ago, Tamir Rice, Andrew Brown just a few days ago, Sandra Bland, Eric Garner, Breonna Taylor, Rashad Brooks, Ahmaud Arbery, Walter Scott, and the list tragically goes on and on of Black people that have been killed by police. You know, many organizations have held steadfast. Certainly the National Action Network, certainly Black Lives Matter, and many other civil and human rights organizations, creating a powerful nonviolent protest campaign. That's certainly all through the summer last year, we saw the largest civil rights demonstrations really on the planet. Every state in our nation had a demonstration. All or much of Europe had demonstrations. Australia had demonstrations. The African continent, many of the countries had demonstrations. Canada had demonstrations, and South America, just about the entire globe. Many of these campaigns were supported by outraged citizens of all races. The most recent conviction of Derek Chauvin would not have been possible without the leadership of these organizations and many people of goodwill of all races who rose up and demanded justice. Black Americans have experienced violence and abuse by law enforcement for centuries. However, the one dynamic that changed is today everybody has a smartphone. And so many of these incidents can be captured immediately. So now we have extensive video recordings of unprovoked police violence towards Black citizens, which can no longer be denied. I salute the courageous citizens who videotaped these incidents, often at considerable personal risk. Despite numerous provocations, the protesters against police violence observed impressive nonviolent discipline. They educated millions about racism in law enforcement, but progress has been uneven, and incidents of violence by law enforcement keep happening. It feels like weekly. Despite all the media coverage of the last year, our challenge today is to enact reforms to improve recruitment, hiring, training, monitoring of police. We must also press the case to establish independent citizen review boards in hundreds of cities so that law enforcement will be held accountable. In recent elections in the US, reason and decency prevailed over violence and hatred for the most part. I thank God that we were able to elect a new president who cares more about people than his ego and bank account. In my home state of Georgia, we shocked the political experts by electing not one, but two new progressive senators, both of whom are dedicated followers of Martin Luther King Jr. And I must say, we elected our first Black United States Senator from the state of Georgia, Reverend Dr. Raphael Warner, pastor of Ebenezer, where my father was co-pastor with his father, Martin Luther King Sr. The primary organizers of the remarkable upset victory were Black women, led by Stacey Abrams, and Deborah Scott, and Helen Butler, and many others. Black women who worked tirelessly to get the vote out. They have provided a new voter turnout model, which we hope will be replicated as much as possible in other states. Yet, despite this impressive achievement, we still face a national crisis of violence, racism, and hatred all across this nation that we call home. Before and since the horrifying riot at the US Capitol on January 6th, we've experienced mass shootings in other public facilities, all too often fueled by hatred and bigotry and targeting racial and religious groups. It's outrageous that several US senators openly condone their actions and still do this very day. Hear that again, several United States senators condone their actions and still do to this day, with the shameful complicity of our former president. Let that be a lesson for us all, that our vigilance against racism and bigotry must be strengthened and never, ever again relax to the point where we are shocked. Today, I appeal to you to increase your efforts to protect and expand voting rights. The most important legislation that meets this challenge are the For the People's Act and the John Lewis Voting Rights Act. The For the People's Act will establish automatic voter registration. It will also help end partisan gerrymandering and put some badly needed limits on the role of big money in American politics, along with other needed reforms. The For the People Act provides a powerful antidote to voter suppression in America. The John Lewis Voting Rights Act will restore the full protections of the Voting Rights Act and provides additional measures to check discriminatory voter suppression practices. As we work together to enact these critical reforms, please stay vigilant and alert to the devious tricks that will be deployed to undercut your voting power. Rise up against felon disenfranchisement. Denying voting rights to people who've been incarcerated has been one of the most effective methods of voter suppression. Think about it this way. You've served and paid your debt to society, so why should your vote be reinstated? But yet, when you are freed and are out paying taxes, you don't pay taxes based on whether or not, and what I'm saying is you pay taxes regardless. So if you got to pay taxes, you ought to be able to participate in representation. Otherwise, that's called taxation without representation. So rise up against widespread voter caging and arbitrary purging of voters by those who seek to disempower people of color at the polls. Stay vigilant. Rise up against voter disenfranchisement projects targeting not only African Americans, but also Latinos and college students and women. Stay vigilant. Rise up against one of the worst forms of voter suppression, and that is the self-imposed apathy that is in our communities, and especially among younger voters. We must do a better job in 2021 and 22 of motivating people to use the power of the ballot to improve their lives and their communities. And as we struggle to eradicate voter suppression, we've simply got to rise up and elect more women to federal, state, and local offices. We've elected a female vice president who happens to be a Black woman and an East Indian woman. And all women should be very proud of that. But actually, we should have done that a long time ago. Women are still grossly underrepresented in America's political institutions. That has to change if we really want this nation to fulfill its promise and its potential. We need more sisters running for office to make our Congress and state legislatures look more like America. So let's rise up and put the pedal to the metal on this one until we achieve gender parity in all of our political institutions. As we look toward a better future with more women and men of goodwill holding office in our federal, state, and local legislatures, let us heed Martin Luther King Jr.'s call to leadership, which echoes across the decades and reverberates in the hearts of everyone who wants to fulfill his dream. Let us rise up and answer his call to purge fear and hatred from our communities and build bridges of greater understanding, cooperation, and goodwill across the chasms of distrust and polarization. Let's rise up and make America a nation that honors its promises about freedom, democracy, an opportunity for all from coast to coast. Let us rise up and be guided by our dreams. Excuse me, not distracted by our fears. My father used to quote an old saying that helped him summon up courage in times of struggle. And it goes like this: fear knocked at the door, but faith answered. There was no one there. And it's up to all of us to reject our fears and insecurities and get involved in the struggle to make a better world. Strong leadership is more about how we dispense kindness, fairness, charity, and forgiveness. These values can empower us to better address the issues we deal with every day in our homes and families, our life in the community, and on the job. Our challenge today is to encourage more of our fellow citizens to rise up and get involved in working for greater interracial understanding, cooperation, and unity. And as we join the movement to vaccinate all Americans and protect them from the COVID pandemic, let us also rise up and inoculate young people, in particular, to resist the toxic virus of racism, sexism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, xenophobia, and all forms of bigotry. Above all, we must keep faith that yes, we can fulfill the dream of Martin Luther King Jr. If we rise up and mobilize our collective human, economic, and organizational resources for a new era of healing and hope. You see, our God put us here in this of the greatest of nations to create an irresistible example of a loving and just society where people of different races and religions break bread together at the table of brotherhood and sisterhood. If we rise up and answer this call to the community with faith, courage, and disciplined nonviolence, we can transform the discords of our time into a symphony of solidarity and mutual uplift. With this commitment, let us rise up together, united, and build the beloved community, rooted in the nurturing soul of justice, compassion, and love. With God's blessings and your support, together, we, the people, can make real the glorious vision of America, the beautiful, and with this faith, we can rise up and lead the way to a more compassionate world where freedom, justice, and peace will reign supreme for all humankind. Your leadership is needed to guide our world to a greater destiny. Rise up now and take a stand against poverty, racism, war, and violence. Rise up with an unwavering determination to reclaim our environment from the ravages of industrial pollution. Rise up and lead nonviolent movements to feed the hungry. Rise up and use your economic power to support a culture of nonviolence. Rise up and work for peace, dignity, and human rights for all people in every nation. Rise up now in a vibrant spirit of justice, compassion, and love, united and determined to create a better America and a better world where people of all races, religions, and nations can live together as sisters and brothers in peace and harmony. My dad used to say, in life, we must find out what our calling is, and when we identify that, we must do our jobs well. He said we must do those jobs so well that the living, the dead, or the unborn could do those jobs no better. He went on to say, even in life, when you find out what your job is, doing that job well may mean if you're a sweet street sweeper, sweet streets like Michelangelo carved marble, sweep streets like Beethoven composed music, sweep streets like Raphael painted pictures, sweep streets like Shakespeare wrote poetry, sweep streets so well that all the host of the heavens and earth would have to pause and say, here lived a great street sweeper who did his job well. My mom took me to an undergraduate school, and I'll close with this story. Antioch College in Yellow Springs, Ohio. And on that college, there was a statue of the educator, Horace Mann. And under that statue was an inscription that said, "Be ashamed to die until you've won a victory for humanity." I was 14 years old when I first saw that inscription, and I was profoundly moved. I said, "Oh my God, how do you win a victory for humanity?" And then I broke it down. I said, maybe this is over time, going 5, 6, 7, 8 times over the years. I said, we can win a victory on our street, or we can win a victory in our neighborhood. Some of us may win victories in our schools. Some of us may win victories in our places of worship. Some may win victories in our cities. Some may even win victories in our state. Some may win victories in our nation. And better yet, some may even win victories in our world. All those words mean are be ashamed to die until you've done a little something to make the world in which we all must live a little better than it was when you arrived. Thank you, and may God continue to bless the Sacramento chapter, to bless all the residents of Sacramento, all the residents of the state of California, and all the residents of the United States of America, and all the residents of our world. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you, Mr. King. Those words were insightful, encouraging us to rise up and to be the best and to go after our victories in the areas that God has planted us. Thank you so much again. And I thank you for this time to be able to have a small conversation with you, to draw some more out of you, get your wisdom. And the first question that I want to ask you about is, what do you think about this new civil rights movement? It was brought to our attention this morning in some of our panels that we have embarked upon a new civil rights movement, especially in this last year under this pandemic, after the murder of George Floyd. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, let me first say what I am very excited about, and that is the number of young people that are engaged in the movement for civil rights, civil and human rights, and social change, justice movements. Every week there are demonstrations somewhere in our nation, and somewhere actually in our world, but in our nation. And most of those demonstrations are being led by young people, young Black folk, young white folk, young Latinos, young Asians. And I think there's a new emergence. Now, I remember back in 1963, I'm gonna date myself, and many of us, Rev, and maybe some of the young folk, that's a long time ago. But in 1963, in Birmingham, Alabama, there were young children who were in high school and elementary school who were arrested tragically. And I had not seen a student kind of led movement like that until around 2018, when the Parkland students at Douglas Stoneman High School in Florida rose up because 14 or 15 persons were killed. It may have been even 16. And they rose up and organized all across this nation. And then in the 2018 election, more young people participated, and the Democratic Party took back the House. And then all of a sudden, several pieces of legislation were passed to have responsible gun legislation. It would not pass in the House because you had obstinate old people. I'm not discriminating against anybody who's old, by the way, because I'm not a young person. I'm young in spirit, but I'm 63 years old. So I can't talk about, but you have a lot of senators on the Republican side, yes, and they were in the majority, and they would not let legislation be brought to the floor. So in this year, we elected a new president, thank God. Actually, we elected last year, but he was inaugurated this year in January. And new leadership is occurring, and we took over the Senate. Just a small majority. It's 50-50, and the vice president breaks a tie. But the Senate has a rule, a provision called the filibuster provision. And to pass legislation, you need 60 senators, not 51, a simple majority. And so we've got to keep working so that we can get more senators if we want to get gun legislation and police reform and so many other things. We need the George Floyd Policing Act passed right now. It passed in the House again. The John Lewis Voter Registration Act passed in the House. H.R. 1, the For the People Act, passed in the House. But you got a Senate that still needs some working on. So the work is not done, is all I want to say. But I am convinced that the young people of our nation are engaged, and we must stay vigilant. We must mobilize. We must organize. We must strategize and stay, and sometimes burn the midnight oil. That's what's going to bring about the change. So I think the nation and the world is ripe for this new movement. And unfortunately, 75 million people voted for the former president, and they aren't going to go anywhere. Those people know those attitudes are still very real. As I said in the presentation, there are senators who still support the lie that the former president is talking about. In fact, we see state after state creating, just today, Florida created some more repressive legislation to suppress and minimize those who are in the Black and brown and poor communities and students, suppress their rights to vote, not make it easier. We call ourselves a democracy. And a governor has the audacity, just as our governor did a few weeks ago, to create this regressive, suppressive, irresponsible legislation. But you know what? I believe we are going to be vigilant in spite of what they have put obstacles in our way to try to keep us from voting or restrict our rights. It's restriction. That's really what it is. It's a sad day in America when we keep seeing this happen.
Right.
But I know that we're going to be vigilant.
Right. And well, you are in the hotbed. Of course, Atlanta, Georgia proved to be the change-making state in regards to this last election cycle, making sure that we do have a Biden and Harris administration, a new administration, thank God. And I know you were a part of that. Speaking of young people and your daughter, Yolanda, she spoke at the March on Washington there. How did that feel for you to have your daughter speak in the same place as your father and you in front of 200,000 people? I mean, she stole the show. I know you're proud. What are your thoughts on that?
I just thank my wife and I thank God every day, literally every day, because we are so proud of our daughter. And this is not something that we posed upon her. Mm-hmm. This is her head and heart coming together. Since she was 2 or 3 years old, she's been concerned about homelessness. She's been concerned about environmental justice. She's been concerned about guns. And the list of things that she has a concern about. Injustice. Her grandfather said, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. I can't be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And you can't be what you ought to be until I'm what I ought to be, because our destinies are tied together. She has a heart to fight against things that are unjust and to fight for those who cannot speak for themselves. And so, as I said, we are so thankful for her and what she has chosen to do. And hopefully it grows. I expect it to. I can't almost see it any other way. But again, my wife and I have never, if she does not want to do something, we support her wholeheartedly. Yeah. But when she wants to do something, she genuinely has this passion. And we just, I don't even know, I don't have words for how proud my wife and I are of our daughter, Yolanda.
Well, I can just imagine being a third generation pastor, preacher, minister. I recognize the calling and the mantle when it falls upon the next generation. So I understand where you're at, and I believe understand your emotions and relate to that in a big way. In a big way. Listen, as you know, history was made recently with the guilty verdict of Derek Chauvin for the murder of George Floyd. Yet on the same day, Ma'Khia Bryant, a 16-year-old black girl, was fatally shot by police officers in Columbus, Ohio. And then from then on, we've had other police shootings of young black men that occurred most recently. Andrew Brown, that's right. And you probably have it better.
Yeah.
North Carolina, so many. This begs the question, are we making any progress? What do you think about the verdict, and in your point of view, are we making any progress?
I would have to say the short answer is yes, because we have a different administration that when you look at the fact that the Justice Department has come in and is looking at the whole department in Minneapolis, as well as 3 or 4 other states, and it's probably going to be more than that that they're going to be looking at. So an investigation is going on about what's happening with policing. That's just one step. There are many, many more that have to be made. I don't want to be a prognosticator or a person who predicts. Something else is going to have to happen for this kind of this behavior of policing to change, of the police culture. We've got to do new psychological evaluations. We've got to weed out this racist element of policing. We've got to figure out how do you make all lives equal. We just don't see this kind of conduct. You may remember that sometimes during the verdict area, that maybe even before the verdict, there was a white guy in Minnesota in a small town who had a hammer, and they arrested him. He was talking crazy to the police and doing all kind of crazy things. They took him to jail. We know had that been a black man, he'd been killed. Just like, Dante Wright, who was afraid and was getting back in the car. People say, well, why do you run if you're not guilty? Well, if you don't have an experience that many of our young people have every day with policing and how you are over-policed and policed differently, then you can't understand. You don't have the capacity or to realize. Now, what's wonderful is there are many young white people, and whites in general, who are now looking at this standard and saying, you know what, this is wrong. We're going to join in this movement. We're going to stand up for righteousness, stand up for truth, stand up for justice. And all that is good. So my overall sense is we are making a tiny bit of progress, but we've got miles and miles to go before we address the issue of policing. We need more civilian review boards, as I said in the speech. We need diversity, sensitivity, and human relations training over and over again. We need policemen hired from the communities that they police. Right. That's critical because, when you have a vested interest in the community where you live, you're going to treat that community different than someone who comes from another community and really doesn't care or about the community at all. So, there are a lot of things. Those are some of the things that have to be instituted. And it's going to take time. I think there are 18 or 19,000 police forces around the country. Right. And unfortunately, there are more of them. Well, obviously, there are more of them, I hope, that are doing good policing than bad policing. But there are a significant number of them that are doing bad policing. And we've got to address that. This is a huge issue. But my sense is we're going to make progress under this current administration.
Yeah, and you've referred to that a couple of times about the current administration of Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. History was made right there in in her election, her being the vice president, first African American Indian woman vice president. Then also that was largely in part because of what happened in Georgia with our first black senator there, Reverend Raphael Warnock, who's rode on the coattails of your family to be a part. And I say that in all respect, you know, and of his work. But we had historic history making with him being elected, and then also John Warnock as well. What's your hopes for this new administration? Can you speak more about that in this next 4 years, especially after the last 4 years we've gone through?
Well, in the first 100 days, we've already seen a dramatic change. We've seen a president stand up with dignity and respect, treating people with dignity and respect, not denigrating someone who you disagree with. I mean, you know, senators have said some things about him, but you've not seen him go out and denigrate each one of those and make a tweet to really be, you know, you do something to me, I'm gonna do something to you. That whole eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth philosophy, which would mean, you know, in the old days, biblical days, that maybe existed, but if we use that today, most of us would be without eyes and teeth. So that obviously, you know, cannot work, and that's what my father and many others saw and talked about. So my higher point, though, is this administration is working on creating jobs. Number one, it has already worked significantly on addressing the pandemic, and now helping other countries. India is in very bad shape right now as one country. Yeah. And we're looking at helping them. But I won't say it is contained in this nation, but it's certainly managed in a responsible way. And that's a good thing. But then the second thing is we need a jobs program. That's why infrastructure is so important. We've got crumbling bridges and railroads and schools that need to be rebuilt, and parks, all kinds of things. We have enough infrastructure work probably for the next 15 years and could hire millions of people to do this work, paying them very decent wages so that people can take care of themselves and their families and the economy becomes healthy. And I think that's one of the things that this administration, the president and the vice president want to see happen and are going to working on. As I said, the Justice Department is already going around looking at police departments and evaluating the police misconduct. I think that, you know, when it comes to international affairs, we have seen bridges being rebuilt with allies and others around the world. And that all of these things are important to make this nation, help this nation move forward. There's even been some talk about what do we do to eradicate poverty? I mean, poverty in America is beyond what it should be. And, you know, I always talk about the new Poor People's Campaign that is led by Reverend Dr. William Barber, who we saw in Elizabeth City just the other day, in fact, at the funeral of Andrew Brown with Reverend Sharpton and other folks from the community. But the new Poor People's Campaign, you got it in America. They tell you there's about 45 million poor people, or people who are living at the poverty level. If you talk to Dr. Barber, it's more like over 100 million.
Wow.
So almost a third of the population is, you know, living at the poverty level. That has to change. We have trillions of dollars in this nation. But my father, the reason he was killed, by the way, was not because he was talking about folks being able to go up and order a hamburger or be able to sit somewhere in a restaurant or a movie theater, but he talked about a radical redistribution of wealth. Yes. And that's still going to have to happen because 54% of the wealth is in the hands of 1% of the people. That's a formula for disaster. We've got to figure out, how do we close the gap between Black and white income, for example? Black income prior to the pandemic, it's less now, was about $15,000. White income saved up was about $175,000. $175,000, $15,000. I mean, that's a huge gap. We should Black families should be at 100,000 at least by now. So that means we got to do some dramatic things to close that gap. And I think that there are corporations who are willing to participate. You know, I know Jamie Dimon and Chase Bank has talked about it. And there are many other corporations that are talking about. So that's one area we got to close. And then, as I said, in terms of the poverty in this country, we got to find ways to lift people up, to give people jobs, to give people hope. And I believe that while this administration, no one administration is going to be able to do it all, but at least we're on the right track and the right road moving toward those things. And we have to keep working together collectively to make this happen and make the nation the kind of nation it ought to be for all Americans.
So true, so true. I agree with every point. One thing that your father, it's my last question, but one thing your father exhibited, your family, you, and others in this struggle, is that how one person can make a difference, and how one person can, just doing what they do, can really help change the trajectory of the world. And we just got to talk about big problems, the poverty rate being so high, the need for jobs. And then you think about going outside this nation, with India, what's happening now, with how COVID is just ravaging that nation right now. What do you say? What is in your closing thoughts? What do you say to that single mom, who's looking to make a change, that young teen who's ready to be activist, who's said, I need to make a difference, that social justice leader looking for an elected office? What do you say to us in this moment?
So I think first, my always goal is to present the issues as they are, but also to leave people with a sense of hope. Because when all else is gone, it's hope. I mean, we are a people of faith. We have a lot of faith. And most people most ethnic groups could not have gone through what we've gone through, right, and still be standing strong and growing and surviving and thriving. We live in a nation that has an abundance of resources, an abundance of intellectual prowess, an abundance of everything. And so what we have to think about is, how do I tune into that frequency? It's energy. God is on the throne, but you got to tune in to God to be able to get your blessings.
Yes, sir.
In my opinion.
Yes, sir.
And so that energy has to be galvanized. I think what I hope is that none of us can, no matter what your circumstances are, no matter what situation you're in, I hope you never give up, you never give out, you never give in. I understand if some people do, but we really need every person at the table. And we need to figure out, how do we lift each other up in little ways and big ways? Because there really is nothing that we as a human species, that God has empowered us, that we cannot do if we put our minds to it. We put our hearts to it. And sometimes we have to physically put our energy to it. There's nothing that we cannot achieve. But you got to believe that. And almost when you're at your lowest point is when you have to find the faith. I remember Dad saying that when he was in Montgomery, they were trying to run him out of there. And it was in '55 when my mom and my older sister Yolanda were in the bed late at night, and he got a phone call. And it was late at night, and the person on the phone said, you know, nigga, if you don't get out of here, we gonna come and kill your wife and your family, your daughter. And he said, while he'd gotten these calls, hundreds of them, this one bothered him for some reason. He said he was, first of all, it was at midnight. Strange things happen at midnight. Yeah. And he went into the kitchen and was trying to drink coffee. And he said he couldn't call on his mother or his father because they were 140 miles away in Atlanta. And he kept thinking about his theological and all of the training that he had, philosophical training. And he said he got down on his knees to pray, and he said, God, I know the cause is right. I know I'm doing what I believe is right, but I just don't know. And he said that at that moment, he heard a voice saying, Martin Luther King Jr., stand up for righteousness, stand up for truth, stand up for justice, and know that I will be with you even until the end of time. So his faith propelled him. I mean, Dad was, from time to time, had down periods. So we all get down, but you gotta want to get back up no matter what is thrown at you, and know that you can overcome it. We see it happening every day with some individuals because they have that resilience, that quality that says, no matter what you do, I'm gonna keep keeping on and see what the end is gonna be and help create circumstances that make it better for me, my family, and for our community. So, you know, Dad said it, the ultimate measure of a man is not where you stand in times of comfort and convenience, but in challenge and controversy.
That's right.
He talked about, on some questions, cowardice asked, is a position safe? Expediency asked, is a position politic? Vanity asked, is a position popular? But conscience asked, is a position right? Sometimes he said we must stand up for positions that are neither safe, nor popular, nor politic, but we must stand because our consciences tell us they're right. And I think when you stand for righteousness, doors open up.
Yes.
Things happen that you can't always explain, but it happens. And we can give example after example after example, but you got to believe first. You got to have something to hold on to.
Thank you. On that note, let's give a hand to, I want to call you Reverend so badly because you speak like a reverend, but Mr. Martin Luther King III, the Honorable. Thank you for your time. Thank you for this conversation. It has been inspirational, it's been informative, and you have given us so much wisdom during this time. We thank you for your time on tonight. We thank you for the sacrifices of your family and leading us in this struggle for so long. Again, let's give it up for the Honorable Martin Luther King III, NAN Sacramento Rise Up Conference. Thank you, sir. We're going, tomorrow is day 3, our final day for our conference. And we're happy to have it be dedicated to our youth. Our youth huddle started at 9:30 a.m. You don't want to miss it. We have young activists coming in to speak about what they're doing to make change happen. And then we have a special musical guest on tomorrow, none other than Grammy Award winner P.J. Morton will be with us on tomorrow. You don't want to miss none of it. Let me tell you, it's going to be exciting, exciting, exciting. Thank you for tuning in on this evening. We hope that you have been blessed by what you have seen and heard on tonight. We'll see you tomorrow. We're going to run that video because our tech people are excellent, and we'll see you after the video tomorrow.